welcome to the Yapping with YUCCA podcast. Today is a very exciting episode because we're going to be talking about Chevron. We have a lot to talk about, so we'll get right into it. I'm Savannah, I use she, her pronouns. Could everyone please introduce themselves, say your name, pronouns, and what is your least favorite oil company?
I love that question. I can start. I'm Sofia, I use she, her pronouns. I'm on YUCCA staff, and I'm going into my third year being on staff, which is crazy. I haven't been on any of the podcast episodes yet, but I've been in the background of them, so this is new for me. But my least favorite oil company is definitely Chevron. Like, they just piss me off so much. Like, we'll get into it, all the research about all of the shit they do, and then at the end of the day, when I try and relax and unwind and watch shows, I see their fucking commercials, and it drives me crazy. They're like, we're the human energy company. We're, building a clean future, and I'm like, literally, fuck you. Like, I can't even express. Yeah, obviously, fuck all the other ones too, but fuck Chevron in specific.
In particular.
Yeah.
Hi y'all, my name is Zephyr. I use they, them pronouns, and I come from the pueblos of Sada and San Felipe. And honestly, I don't think I have a least favorite, because fuck them all across the board. Yeah, but Chevron a little extra right now, and we'll get into why. We'll get into why very soon. And I can pass it to Dave. Dave on the line with us.
Yo, what's up, everyone? Maraweka Sikatsa Tabani. What's up, everyone? It's a good day today. Nanani, it's Dave Pecas. My name is Dave Pecas, and I'm a YUCCA. I've been a YUCCA member for like maybe 2 years now. And I'm currently been doing the YUCCA Fellow internship for the summer. And yeah, my least favorite oil company is just all of them in general. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll pass it to, who can I pass it to?
Yeah, so want to jump into acknowledging the lens that the podcast Yapping with YUCCA is recorded on. We are currently working from stolen Tiwa lands in so-called Albuquerque. And these are the traditional homelands, my people, my ancestors. And just wanting to, reaffirm that YUCCA will never stand for anything less than land back. Period.
Before we get started, we also wanted to acknowledge that we're in the 11th month of the ongoing genocide in Palestine. The death toll has surpassed 40,000 people, with The Lancet, a prestigious medical journal, estimating that this is a gross undercount. It actually exceeds 186,000. This surge in casualties comes as the Biden-Harris administration approves a historic $20 billion arms deal with Israel, intensifying the crisis.
Yeah. In New Mexico, this situation, this genocide going on, resonates deeply with our own history of resistance. New Mexico is a colonial state, residing in, the so-called United States, in the belly of the beast, as we call it. We have a heavy responsibility due to our country and our federal government's support for these atrocities. So it's not just a political issue, right? It's not like just about military funding. It's a moral crisis. Like, people are dying every day with our tax dollars. So this advocacy and this work that's been going on kind of all over the country, it's advocating for an end to military aid, supporting the boycott, divestment, and sanctions, or BDS movement, which is a movement to take our own consumer dollars out of companies that are supporting the genocide, and elect leaders that are committed to human rights and environmental protection, which are inextricably linked.
Yeah, precisely. So, wanting to turn to the recent events, happening at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. A couple of YUCCA leaders, including myself, we joined, tens of thousands of protesters to demand, accountability from, the Democrats' administration. And our presence highlighted the need for real political alternatives and standing against a system that has failed to address the suffering in Gaza that did not just start on October 7th. Like, this has been ongoing for the past 76 years. And a moment that really resonated for me at the DNC was being there with the uncommitted delegates who were representing voters that were very, very critical on Biden's lack of action on Gaza and actually enabling the genocide to become worse. And the uncommitted delegates, they were ignored and sidelined, and a Palestinian American was not allowed on the DNC stage to speak, which, in my opinion, is like the bare minimum. Like, the bar, is underground. And so, the speech that Harris, delivered inside the Union Center just reaffirmed, the Democrats' support for Israel. It's deepening the disconnect between, the party and the demands for justice. And, as delegates were leaving the speech that night at the Union Center, they were dispersing. And all of the uncommitted delegates and folks, there were there to meet them. And, the delegates reacted very, very callously to, the recitation of the names of Palestinian martyrs outside of the dispersal. And these were names of martyrs that were lost in this genocide, and they were walking out and making fun, making jokes out of this, laughing and recording, like dancing, like just treating it like a whole joke. And I think that just goes to show that like it is.
Thank you so much for representing YUCCA at the DNC, Zeph. So we decided to talk about Chevron specifically because of the indiscriminate abuse and violence that this company specifically has engaged in and continues to engage in. They're currently very active in New Mexico, looking to expand and trying to poison our water in the process. We'll also go into some of Chevron's history of global human rights abuses and the part that they're playing in the ongoing Palestinian genocide. With this episode, we want to highlight that climate change and Israel's colonization of Palestine are not separate issues. Both climate change and colonialism are rooted in capitalism and motivated by unadulterated greed. The endless growth that oil companies and settler colonial entities want will lead to the end of human life if left unchecked, and is already causing thousands of species to go extinct every year. In addition, according to UNICEF, approximately 20,000 children are displaced due to climate change every day, and that number is only growing. In 2023, there were over 2,000 heat-related deaths in the US. This was the highest in 45 years of records and a 117% increase from 1999. The corporations who are fueling the climate crisis are guilty of genocide. These companies have known about climate change for decades and have still chosen to not only extract and burn fossil fuels, but to increase production at insane rates. In 2020, Chevron made $94 million in revenue. In 2022, they made $246 billion. That's almost $500,000 per minute. Despite this egregious amount of revenue and growth, they are still looking to expand and make New Mexicans suffer for it.
So basically, Chevron's participation in New Mexico and their operations are expanding. And so 25% of their worldwide oil and gas output comes from the Permian Basin, which is located here in southern so-called New Mexico. And they've been trying to corrupt state leadership and legislators. They've been paying politicians and PACs in New Mexico, having increased exponentially since 2010. There's over $332,000 like total in donations, and that was just in 2023 last year. Also in 2023, they acquired about 25,000 more acres in the Permian Basin when they bought PDC Energy. And so the PAC in New Mexico has received about $2.3 million from Chevron in 2018. They went on to oppose the candidacy of State Land Commissioner Stephanie Garcia-Richard. And so this kind of all connects us to the Wastewater Reuse Rule. And so this expands the use of fracking waste, known as produced water, outside the oil field. So their goal is to use this water for things like agriculture, irrigation, aquifer recharge, industrial processes, and also like environmental restoration, which is actually fucking crazy considering that this waste has like carcinogens, benzene, all of this like stuff, and now we're wanting to put it into different sectors, and so it's like, you know, great, here, enjoy your fucking radioactive peaches.
Yeah.
It's literally crazy.
Yeah. Fracking waste, it's also referred to as produced water or brackish water a lot of the times. Brackish water is like a really broad term, but it's used in the same kind of way. It contains arsenic, barium, bromide, mercury, benzene, and PFAS, which stands for per and polyfluoroalkyl, I don't know how to say that, that's why people say PFAS, substances which are known as forever chemicals, and radioactive isotopes like tritium and deuterium. So there's a lot of really awful shit in there, and the thing about fracking waste also is like we don't know for sure how much or what is in all of these things because it's a secret. They classify it as trade secret, so the public doesn't know what's going in and out of these fracking wells and what's consequentially polluting our water just because of the operations. Now they're like, oh, we're gonna take this water and use it for other stuff. Like, that's absolutely insane.
Just 14% of the chemicals in fracking waste have been properly tested for health impacts.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's actually crazy.
Yeah, and our governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, and the New Mexico Environment Department are trying to frame the Wastewater Reuse Rule as a solution to address our water crisis. Mexico is in extreme drought, and we are also giving our water rights away to many other companies. So it's really an ill-disguised attempt to save oil and gas production in New Mexico by solving the oil and gas industry's wastewater problem.
So what this waste is currently being used for is it's being reused in the drilling process or being injected underground, but these injections have caused an increase in earthquakes. At the Water Quality Control Commission hearing last month where we talked about the wastewater reuse issue, a few of us went and gave public comment in opposition, like most of the public commenters there. Oil and gas industry witnesses emphasize that if they don't find a solution to their enormous toxic waste problem, they'll have to reduce drilling in New Mexico, which is why they're pushing so hard for this rule. It's completely motivated by their desire to increase production in New Mexico.
Yeah, totally.
So fracking waste disposal is not new. It has also happened in Wyoming and Pennsylvania. A study conducted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Wyoming found that produced water discharges caused impaired reproduction among birds, embryo mortality, made them more prone to exposure, disease, parasites, and predation, and certain sections of streams were polluted to the point where they no longer support aquatic life. In Pennsylvania, a study by Pennsylvania State University found that discharges of produced water from treatment plants into rivers have caused elevated levels of salt and radioactive chemicals. They ended the study by stating that surface water discharges of oil and gas wastewater by centralized waste management plants pose risks to human and aquatic health. So, based on all of these studies, we can see that this stuff wreaks havoc on life, all life. So that is why we are in such strong opposition to this, and why Chevron has no respect for life at all.
Definitely. I think, talking about like all of like the messed up shit that like they've done, and then as we go further along the timeline, and the state, they then decided to put on this symposium series, with Chevron as a sponsor, and other industry, that are doing the same stuff as sponsors, and so in attempt to turn New Mexicans in favor of the wastewater reuse rule, Chevron ended up investing a lot of money into the symposium series, and so it ended up being 5 parts. They're called Agua es Critica, which doesn't even translate apparently, but it's just like, I think it's crazy. It's like basically a longer way of saying water is life, and so it's just like, again, further co-optation, which is so
take our language.
And so these events are industry proponents basically spreading propaganda about the safety of produced water reuse, which, you know, we just went over that it's not.
Yeah.
And, you know, New Mexico state employees and legislators are participating in Chevron's greenwashing about the need for fracking waste reuse to solve the water scarcity issues that the oil and gas industry itself is causing. You know, and they have also attempted to speak for state leaders and not letting them speak for themselves. And so, you know, we know that we can't, you know, buy our way out of the climate crisis, and the fact that this wastewater is such a big problem that now, you know, the way that they're going to attempt to fix it is to create a market for that wastewater and commodify it. Like, like the desalination process, like, is not proven to work on PFAS and carcinogens and all of those like crazy heavy metals that you had just listed. And so, like, again, just market schemes, but at the end of the day, like, we cannot buy our way out of the climate crisis. That's just not how it works.
Right. Like, we bought our way into it. Like,
Exactly.
why do we think the thing that caused the crisis is gonna solve it? Like, it's just insane. At the hearing, the oil and gas people confirmed that without a solution to their waste problem, they will have to stop drilling in New Mexico. It's like, duh, like, okay, stop creating waste. But their support of this rule is like so clearly motivated by their desire to keep drilling, despite all of us knowing globally, right? Like, everyone knows we have to stop drilling, we have to stop extracting, and we have to phase out fossil fuels and oil and gas production to stay on track to like mitigate the worst effects of climate change, and keep like below that 1.5 degrees of global warming, and just to try and cause the least amount of effects. So this is a huge issue in New Mexico right now. If you want to find out more, go to defendnmwater.org, right? That's the website for a group of organizations that's been working to fight this rule and to really try and defend our water. We, as YUCCA, we said fuck that to the symposium series, which was held at a winery called Casa Rondeña Winery here in Albuquerque in North Valley, Los Ranchos area. So we basically showed up and stood outside, and we blocked entrances with our bodies and held up signs and chanted, saying like, fuck this, like, this is our communities, this is our water, you don't get to, you know, act like you're solving this crisis that you created. So we did this action. You can find more about it on our Instagram as well. Dave, yucca.nm is our Instagram. Dave designed a really dope banner that we used for the action as well. So yeah, does anyone else, I know all three of y'all were at the action, anyone want to add like how it felt, anything else you think I missed?
Yeah, I was on bike support. It was extremely fun. So if y'all want to join in our future actions, we could always use more people. We have a member interest form that you could fill out. Yeah, I handed out op-eds to cars that were coming by, and also a cop who read through the op-ed, which was pretty funny. They were very sassy and rude. Yeah, but I was sassing them back a little bit, which was fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a part that stuck for me was just like the immediate like tone of the security, like their private security. Like, they were like already ready to like put hands on us, like, you know, taking pictures of like, you know, us and our vehicles, and, you know, threatening like legal action and all of this stuff. And I think it just goes to show like how far you know, like, people will go to protect industry and to uphold, you know, the status quo.
Yeah.
And protect their profit, for sure.
Mm-hmm. The status quo is their profit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking of Chevron and monsters, we have an Instagram series called Meet the Monster, which you'll find a lot of the information that we're talking about in this episode, but there's all the information about the Ecuador lawsuit that the Chevron monster just mentioned. There's a lot of information on our Instagram, so Yeah, but going back, sorry, to talk about all the other evil shit that Chevron's done in New Mexico, they collaborated with Los Alamos National Labs in 2006 on a project to enhance the shale oil extraction process. And Los Alamos or Lanol is famous for being the site of the Manhattan Project, where the first nuclear bomb was developed and detonated, which happened at the expense of New Mexicans who were displaced without compensation from their homes, who were sickened working at the labs, and those who endured the ongoing effects of the Trinity test explosion, which continues to sicken the people of the Pajarito Plateau. So shout out Dr. Mariah Gomez, who in her book Nuclear Nuevo Mexico details the impacts of what she understands to be the third wave of colonialism in New Mexico, nuclear colonialism. She talks about her cousin, who was a lifelong employee at Lanol, who was exposed to radiation during a nuclear spill, which caused him multiple organ failures over the span of 10 years. Her grandmother's family was forcibly displaced from their ranches and land without adequate compensation. That's just a little bit. We could talk further about Lanol and nuclear in New Mexico, but through its collaboration with deeply colonial projects, Chevron has shown that it does not support New Mexicans, in spite of their claim that the company's core value is to protect people and the environment.
That's ridiculous.
Right?
Yeah.
So Chevron has committed many atrocities abroad. They are a multinational corporation, so they're not accountable to any one legal system. They have a way of going through loops in legal systems and winning cases where they were clearly the wrongdoers. So yeah, we have an op-ed on a lot of these. We can link it in the description of this podcast so you can read through it. But yeah, I'll pass it over to Zeph to go into their atrocities in Ecuador.
Yeah, so the Chevron monster mentioned earlier, Chevron is, the perpetrator of what is widely known as one of the worst oil-related environmental disasters in history. And that was, through polluting the rainforests in Ecuador with cancer-causing contaminants for, more than 30 years. And Chevron is, still avoiding paying off the $9.2 billion settlement for this destruction. Ecuadorians have not received a penny of this. And not only that, Chevron went as far as to go back and press charges on Ecuador's lawyer, which they then, ended up, I'm not sure if he was incarcerated, but I do know that he was under house arrest for a while, was not, they took his passport and stuff like that, so he's not able to do any, legal representation work out of the country. The retaliation that we've seen from Chevron is crazy.
On that note, Chevron has been known to pay off police to attack and in some cases kill protesters, like in Nigeria. In the Botowo versus Chevron case filed in 2008, Chevron was involved with the murder of protesters in Nigeria. The police who beat, shot, and killed unarmed citizens protesting Chevron's contamination of their communities were called to the scene by Chevron and were also on Chevron's payroll. The judge of the case stated, "It is apparent that Chevron Nigeria and Chevron forces had a much closer relationship than the traditional relationship between private parties and law enforcement officials in this country. The Nigerian forces were on the Chevron Nigeria payroll and engaged in extensive security work for Chevron. Chevron did not simply dial 911, end quote. This was not the first nor the last time Chevron has gotten away with literal murder on account of twisted legal logic. I'll pass it over to Pecas to talk about Chevron's hand in the genocide going on in Palestine.
Thanks, Savannah. So we're going to talk about owning and operating gas fields on Palestinian land. So Chevron also benefits from and plays an active part in Israel's ongoing colonization of Palestine. Chevron owns and partially operates the two largest Israeli natural gas fields and generated $1.5 billion in revenue in 2022 alone. The Mexicans will not stand for this injustice overseas or here at home. And so the next topic is providing fuel to Israel. This goes into who's aiding and abetting these war crimes. So this January, the International Court of Justice called out Israel for the heinous crimes against humanity it is committing in Gaza, and cautioned Israel's allies to withdraw aid lest they risk charges of complicity in genocide. According to Article 6 of the Genocide Convention, leaders, managers, and directors of corporations, as well as the corporations themselves, run the risk of being held responsible for acts of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. In July, the court's advisory concluded that all states are, quote, under an obligation not to render aid or assistance in maintaining the Israeli occupation. In light of this, Oil Change International has conducted a study and found that 35% of fuel exports to Israel since October in 2023 has been supplied by 6 major oil companies. Those 6 are ExxonMobil, Shell, Eni, Total Energies, BP, and Chevron. Chevron takes the top place, tied with BP, supplying 8% of all oil to Israel since October. Around half of these fuel exports have been provided after the ICJ's ruling, putting these companies in danger of very serious charges. These companies have not just supplied the fuel that has killed and continues to kill tens of thousands of Palestinians, but profited from it. They are enabling and fueling the genocide, displacement, and torture of Palestinians. Chevron's engagement in mass-scale abuse and exploitation has been going on for decades and shows no signs that it will stop on its own. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how Chevron profits from settler colonialism. So we know here in the United States that a lot of wars are committed in our name. So these wars a lot of the time are claiming to be of ones of protection, or being the world's mediator. And we believe we cannot be the world's mediator if we are causing conflict abroad and profiting from it. And so it seems a lot of these latest wars in the history of humanity are kind of like, in the most simple terms, made up because war is profitable. So, when it's actually, so it seems like actually peace is like detrimental to their profits and them being able to make a surplus amount of money. And since the military is the U.S. military is the single largest polluter on Earth, they run off a lot of oil and gas. And furthermore, switching to clean energy does not mean that they will be exempt from the responsibility of ending the military-industrial complex, and that they have remediated all of the harm that has done. They still have a lot of cleanup to do. So just because they're not running on oil and gas anymore does not mean that it is fixed. And yeah, it is even begin to be thought of in that way. So it does not matter what kind of energy these is ran on to uphold the military-industrial complex. What matters is that we need cleanup. We need all of this this narrative that the United States is the world's mediator, right? Like we're supposed to babysit all these other countries and all these conflicts, and that's just simply false, because we have caused the United States government and the United States military have caused so much harm here at home to its own citizens. So it's such a hypocritical thing to think that we can protect countries elsewhere when we can't even we're subjugating the people here at home we are claiming to protect from outside harm.
Yeah.
So there's a big hypocrisy, and yeah.
Thank you so much for that explanation and analysis, Pecas. The truth is that the realities of capitalism, indigenous dispossession, fossil fuels, and militarism cannot be separated. They all rely on each other in this terrible loop, and that's why we like to talk about all of them at the same time. As young people, we don't want to live in a world that relies on oil and war as its economic base. Oil companies like Chevron are guilty of colonizing indigenous lands for oil and gas production, just as the United Snakes requires being in a state of perpetual war to maintain its hegemony.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in conclusion, fuck Chevron.
Amen.
Yeah, and I hope that folks listening have learned something. Us doing the research for this episode and for the op-ed that we wrote, you should be able to find it on our Instagram as well. We can also link it in the description. There was hours and hours of research between like 6 or 7 of us. And the more we looked, the more we found out, and it's just so fucked up. And just to think about like the fact that Chevron is trying to like be all friendly with New Mexicans and like with YUCCA specifically too, like after the July symposium was they canceled it because they heard that we were going to try and shut it down. And that just shows our power, first of all. Shout out to us. They're so scared of us, they canceled their event before we even did anything. But they had reached out to us and asked if we wanted to talk and like sit down and have a conversation. And it's just like we can't have conversations with these people. We can't have conversations about like a just transition or moving away from oil and gas with oil and gas companies. Like that's just not possible. So I hope that folks listening can learn something from all of this data about, you know, water, about war, and how all of this is so inexplicably connected. Like, it's so clear to us that Chevron and other companies like that who benefit from colonialism are the reason that we're all facing the issues that we're facing. So I hope you stand with us in opposition to the Wastewater Reuse Rule, in opposition to the genocide in Palestine, and in opposition to Chevron's activities in New Mexico.
I also want to say that like these companies are our real enemies. The right tries to make it seem like the people with the least power in society are wreaking havoc and, I don't know, trying to make those people into our enemies. But the truth is that Chevron and these massive multinational corporations are the ones that are destroying our futures and the possibility of life on Earth. So yeah, we should be channeling our anger towards them, not the oppressed people in the world.
Yeah. So, Dave, do you have anything else to add before we close out?
Yeah, I guess some closing things I was thinking about was like so much of the narrative everyday people have of how much we have such a dependence on the oil and gas industry to move around and to run most of our businesses, most of our infrastructure. And I think that and if we look a little bit at history, we can see that the oil and gas industries have paid, they have spread a lot of propaganda over this past century and past century, maybe this past century, but in order to, and I'm not sure why they would do that, but due to that happening, many people have see it as it's hard to get away from oil and gas, like the dependence on this industry. So immediately when we're trying to talk about solutions to this crisis, people aren't ready to talk about the solution of the oil and gas industry ending, right? It's pollution and its extraction and its unsustainability practices. Because there's such a dependence, and it's hard to see any solution like
Hold on.
away from that. So essentially, with all that information, we can determine that the reason why we don't have a lot of solutions right now away from oil and gas is because so much has gone into like I want to say it's like a false sense of security being dependent on the oil and gas.
Yeah.
So in order to combat that, we really need like real solutions to prop up, and those solutions look uh, like just funding all of what we need in this country instead of funding all this warfare, all this other violence, right? We are funding violence and we are funding mass death instead of funding, what will keep us alive and what will keep our humanity intact too.
Yeah.
So I think when people are really scared to leave people are really scared to leave their dependence on the oil and gas industry at the door because of how much we have become dependent on them. But the solution to that is funding these real solutions so that we're basically not dependent on all that,
Yeah.
and so that we can be used as a crutch too to not make better changes in this world. Because I see a lot of people using that kind of as a crutch towards not caring about these real solutions and making these changes, organizing, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
those are just some thoughts.
Thank you. That's so real.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to plug our People's Climate Plan that we've been working on.
Yeah.
We've been doing a lot of organizing, so we'd really appreciate if you could fill out our survey. It'll be linked below. We're trying to get the input of New Mexicans on what climate solutions they want to see and the kinds of environmental problems that they see in their lives, to hopefully put forth a bill in the coming years. We also have a member interest form linked below, and thank you so much for listening. We really enjoyed recording this and doing the research, so we hope that you're motivated to stand against Chevron and all of its allies and the systems that it requires. So have a great day.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening.
And fuck Chevron.